Much of northern and western Scotland also seeing some bright spells to start the day, but there will be showers coming in. Now, along this rain band, along this weather front, it's also going to be quite gusty, so a wet and windy spell, taking its time before it moves away from Wales. So a pretty soggy morning, that rain working into southwest England, into the Manchester area as well, and eventually jumping over the Pennines into parts of northeast England. Much of the rest of eastern England, though, having a dry day, turning brighter behind it, but with some showers. And quite a mild day. Again, double digits for many, but feeling cooler, particularly with the winds. Now, the winds will ease on Tuesday evening into the night, which will lead to a touch of frost on Wednesday morning. More showers coming into western Scotland, the north coast of Northern Ireland, but many places set fair on Wednesday thanks to high pressure. And for many, the dry, fine weather will continue through Thursday, Friday and into the weekend. However, it is also going to turn quite a bit colder.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems continue up in Dumfries and Galloway for the A74M. Now, the motorway is partly blocked southbound at junction 17, just north of Lockerbie. There's been an accident involving a couple of lorries and a couple of vans. Recovery works underway. In Cheshire, a few miles west of Northwich, the A49 has been closed off the Weaverham roundabout where trees come down. And the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25 is blocked anti-clockwise at junction 20. The A41 Kings Langley exit. Emergency services are at the scene of an accident causing long queues back round to the M1 interchange. In South London and Upper Norwood, the A214 West O'Hill, that's closed for a police investigation. And still no Gatwick Express and Thameslink trains are not stopping in central London at City Thameslink after a water main burst. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
We're giving you not one, but two chances to win this month, with two prize bundles that include an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash. But that's not all. You'll also get a brand new iPhone 16 and a £500 shopping voucher to spend at your favourite store. So why not be extra lucky this month? For a chance to win an iPhone, vouchers and £10,000 in cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good evening to you. It's Monday the 3rd of February and I'm Martin Daubry, filling in for the big man, Nigel Farage, on Farage Tonight. A 15-year-old boy has tragically died after being stabbed to death at a Catholic school in Sheffield this afternoon. This comes only 5 days after the same school was put under a lockdown for threats of knife violence. Is this yet another stabbing that could have been prevented, and is it time for a national knife crime emergency? as Keir Starmer is in Brussels today seeking a reset with the European Union. But as President Trump threatens the EU with tariffs while hinting that the UK could be exempt from any such measures, I'll be asking if the Prime Minister has once again got his priorities wrong. Lawmakers should not be lawbreakers. Famous last words from the Prime Minister there. If my memory serves me correctly, I don't remember voice coaches being on the key workers job list. Well, stick around because we'll be contrasting and comparing Sir Keir's speeches over the years. Guess what? You can't spot the difference. And hundreds of tradesmen descended upon Westminster today demanding government action on the tool thefts that are having devastating impacts on the UK construction industry. And later on, I'll be speaking to a brave tradesman who considered taking his own life after thieves stole thousands and thousands of pounds worth of tools from his van, leaving him unable to work and heartbroken. All that to come, but first is your news headlines, and it's Aaron Armstrong.
Very good evening to you. It is just after 7 o'clock. I'm Aaron Armstrong. A 15-year-old boy has died after a stabbing in a school in Sheffield. The victim was airlifted to hospital after the incident at All Saints Catholic High School, but died just after midday. South Yorkshire Police have confirmed a 15-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder and remains in custody. The school will remain closed on Tuesday as a criminal investigation is carried out. A 14-year-old girl who stabbed 2 teachers and a pupil has been found guilty of attempted murder after CCTV footage of the incident was shown to the jury. It shows the pupil earlier in the day sitting in the school hall where she appeared to stab the knife she would later use in the attack into the floor a number of times. The girl, who cannot be named for legal reasons, is then seen attacking assistant head teacher Fiona Elias and colleague Liz Hopkins. They, along with a pupil, were hospitalised after the attack at Amman Valley School in Carmarthenshire last April. The Prime Minister says the UK won't pick between working with the US and the EU and intends to maintain good ties with both. Sir Keir Starmer made the comments after talks with the NATO boss Mark Rutte ahead of meeting EU leaders at a dinner in Brussels tonight. It's all part of a reset with the bloc. Now, it came amid the prospect of a trade war with the US after Donald Trump said he'll hit the EU with tariffs, but may give the UK a reprieve. The Prime Minister was asked if he'd be willing to water down the UK's reset with the European bloc to keep Washington on side.
Relationship between the UK and the US and the EU, I've always been clear that both are important to us. Now, that, for me, isn't new. I think that's always been the case and will be the case for many, many years to come. That's why in my discussions with President Trump, we've touched on issues of trade and on issues of security, both really important in relation to the trade that we already do between our two countries, but also the security, the defence and the intelligence partnership that we've founded over many, many years, hugely important to our collective defence.
Well, Donald Trump has confirmed the US will delay imposing tariffs on Mexico for a month and has hinted the UK may escape similar sanctions. Trump stated the UK is out of line, but then suggested a deal could be worked out after constructive conversations with the Prime Minister. Trump announced 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico yesterday and 10% for Chinese goods. It's due to begin tomorrow, but he has since announced a temporary reprieve after, in his words, a very friendly conversation with Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum. Global markets, including US markets, slumped earlier following Trump's series of announcements and his stated intention to hit the EU with tariffs. And a former British soldier has been jailed for 14 years and 3 months for spying for Iran and escaping from prison. Daniel Khalif was found guilty of passing sensitive military information to Iranian agents. The 23-year-old also escaped from Wandsworth Prison on the underside of a delivery truck, but was caught 3 days later, back in 2023. The judge described him as dangerous and motivated by a selfish desire to show off. Those are the latest GB News headlines. I'll be back with more in a bit under an hour's time.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
you, Aaron, and we begin tonight's show once again on the sprawling knife crime epidemic in Britain, because a 15-year-old boy has died after a stabbing at a Catholic school in Sheffield. This comes as a 14-year-old girl was found guilty today of attempted murder after she stabbed 2 teachers and a pupil at a school in Wales. GB News
went into lockdown after police took reports at 12:17 of a stabbing on the school premises. A 15-year-old boy later died while with paramedics. The air ambulance was seen on the school's grounds, and a 15-year-old boy is currently in police custody, having been arrested on suspicion of murder. Well, earlier this afternoon, the Assistant Chief Constable Lindsay Butterfield of South Yorkshire Police gave an update on their response to the situation.
It is with great sadness that I share with you today a teenager has died following a stabbing at a Sheffield school earlier today. Our thoughts are with the family of the boy, his friends and the whole school community. At 12:17 p.m, emergency services were called to All Saints Catholic High School on Granville Road. The victim, a 15-year-old boy, suffered serious injuries, and despite the best efforts of the ambulance service, he sadly died a short time later. A 15-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder and remains in our custody at this time.
Well, this tragic incident occurred less than a week after the same school, that's the All Saints Catholic High School in Sheffield, previously went into lockdown, with the headmaster, Sean Pender, telling parents that it had issued a stay-put notice after reports of threats of violence between pupils.
And that was GB News' national reporter Charlie Peters reporting there on that incident at All Saints Catholic School in Sheffield earlier on today. Now, today's question is simple. How many more teenagers are going to be stabbed to death by other teenagers before we realise we have a serious problem with knife crime in the United Kingdom? And moreover, is it time to declare a national knife crime emergency and show no mercy on the cancer of knife crime? Well, joining me now to discuss this is my panel. It's the former Reform spokesman Gawain Towler and GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. I'm also joined in the studio by Sir John Redwood. Gentlemen, welcome. How many more times, Nigel Nelson, are we going to have this conversation? These stories are tragic, yet they're becoming increasingly and depressingly familiar. Teenagers, children, killing children with knives. Lessons will be learned, thoughts and prayers. Nothing changes. When are we going to clamp down on the cancer of knife crime?
Well, I mean, they've tried clamping down many times. We've had knife amnesties. We are going through the process of banning zombie knives from getting into the country, from samurai-style swords. The problem really is your idea of a national emergency is a question of what it would look like. The answer, I think, is to actually enforce existing laws. They're there. You can use them. You can use stop and search. There are a number of things you can do.
But there's a reluctance to do that in case it's racist. Sadiq Khan tried to stamp it out when he was elected. Police forces across the country say they are standing off. They're afraid of being called racist.
Be. I mean, quite simply, they shouldn't be. I mean, if you've got reasonable suspicion, stop and search for any officer is one weapon they can use. So, what I agree with you, we need to actually move on this one to stop more tragedies like this one happening. What I'm trying to say is that the laws are in place at the moment, if only they're used.
Go in.
I would agree that there doesn't need to be new laws. We just have to enforce the ones we've got. I believe that stop and search is a useful tool, a valid tool. I do think that we're banning this sort of knife, we're banning that sort of knife. I'm sure it'll be social media's fault. It'll probably be Amazon's fault. It'll be probably anything apart from the people who are doing it and the culture that is allowing that to happen.
And what is that culture?
It's a very solipsistic, atomised, me too, me first culture. It's all about respect. Nobody deserves respect unless they've earned it. And you've got young children who live online, who live for themselves and for their idea of what is good. rather than that. I don't know what they're learning at school.
Do we have a cultural problem? Look at the faces of the dead. Look at the faces of the killers. 4 times more likely to be dead of knife crime, 4 times more likely to stab someone to death in London if you're from a black ethnic background. These are the facts. The facts aren't racist. Why can't the politicians grasp the nettle?
Because they are frightened. They are frightened of being labelled. And that is understandable because we have a culture of fear of being labelled, of cancellation, of things of that sort. To have a police force that is frightened of cracking down on, and we know on other crimes we have this problem, this terror of being seen to be the bad guys. Well, the bad guys are doing the murders. The bad guys are out there, and we need to address that, or else other families, other children, other parents will be in tears.
Nigel.
Yeah, I mean, there are other things that can be done. I mean, various charities operate in this field. So, for instance, at London Hospital, you've got people who go in who've been victims of knife crime, and they go in at the moment somebody has actually been stabbed to talk to them in the ward. Immediately they come out of surgery. None of that's
working. Knife crime is spiralling.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is, I've met people who had actually turned away from knife crime. So these are things that work. The important thing, obviously, is to prevent it, but the only way we can prevent it is if the police act as they should. And you know, to an extent, I agree with Gwaine here. They shouldn't be put off by racial issues or whatever, and I'm not sure that they are. But they must actually enforce the laws that they've got at the moment.
We also need to speak to the communities where the perpetrators come from, whichever community they are. And my own son was almost brought into a South London gang. One of the reasons I moved him out of London. And to speak to those communities and speak to those parents and speak to the families and say, you have a responsibility to look after your children, to speak to your children, to bring your children up and not leave them open to the temptations that they're open to.
OK, Gwaine, Nigel, we have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much. Moving on, the Prime Minister is in Brussels today for a so-called Brexit reset, but the timing and the message it sends could not be more inopportune. As Keir Starmer causes with EU leaders, a global trade war is brewing, with Donald J. Trump hitting Mexico, Canada and potentially the EU itself with extra tariffs. However, President Trump has hinted that Britain, if it plays its cards right, could be spared. Now, Brexit gives the UK a golden opportunity to strengthen our relationship with the United States, led by an unabashed Anglophile without the EU's trade shackles. Well, that's Brussels' worst nightmare, but could be Britain's biggest advantage if only Sir Keir Starmer had the ambition to seize the vision. Instead, he's locked in talks right now with EU leaders eager to drag Britain back into their regulatory grip. Now, with the US-UK trade deal there for the sheer taking, does the Prime Minister have his priorities all wrong? Is Sir Keir Starmer falling right into the EU's tangled web? Well, joining me now to discuss this is Sir John Redwood, former Conservative MP and Minister, and of course I'm still joined by Gwaine Towler and Nigel Nelson. Sir John Redwood, let's start with you. 5 years ago on Friday, it was Brexit Day. The champagne corks were flying around the nation on Friday night, apart from, obviously, in Downing Street. They refused to even mark the occasion. And now on the first Eurostar, Monday morning, Sir Keir Starmer. Is this the beginnings of a clear Brexit surrender?
Well, it's dreadful, and I so admired what you just said. I fully support your idea that he should be on a plane to Washington. He should be cancelling the Chagos giveaway, which has really annoyed Trump. He should be saying, I'm not on the EU side wanting a trade war with you. I want a free trade deal with you. We have a good and fair trade already, and it can be improved. And he should make it very clear that that's his number one aim. And he should be helping Trump on NATO, which has been underfunded on the European side of the Atlantic for far too long, and free riding on the back of the Americans. And the EU has always seen the United Kingdom as treasure island to pillage, take the fish, take the money, put us under their controls. I think Starmer doesn't understand that. I think he's going to fall for it again. Their idea of negotiating is give us a load of demands and say they won't even let you around the table until you agree all their outrageous demands. Please, Keir, don't give it all away.
You talk about the Great British Giveaway, and I think a lot of people agree with that. I've worked in Brussels. There's a lot of subsidised lunches, There's no such thing as a free lunch. You don't get anything out of Brussels without having to give something back in return. And there's already rumours of youth mobility schemes, of alignment on net zero. That would annihilate any last vestiges of the shale industry, of the oil and gas industry, and, of course, regulation on the economy. This means never been free and nimble to change our taxation. These were all basic Brexit promises.
Well, of course, and these Brexit freedoms are still there for the taking, and this man just won't do it. I mean, fortunately, the EU is so bad that we are now free of thousands of extra pages of regulation they put on since we've left, and we're not paying the 17 billion a year into them anymore, which is actually going into the NHS. That's had a lot more money. And, of course, we've ducked the 800 billion of extra borrowings which the EU are now taking on, which will be up to each member state to help repay. So at least we ducked that. But there's so much more on offer, as you rightly say. We could get rid of crippling regulations. We could have a much more sensible policy on net zero so that we don't take all our own industry out and close it all down and import everything as if that helped when it actually increases world CO2. I mean, it is self-harm on a mega scale, and it is just so stupid.
This morning, Donald Trump called the European Union an atrocity. He said they've been getting away with murder on tariffs. He's clearly got them in his crosshairs. At the same time, he gave Britain a get-out-of-jail card. He said, oh, no, the UK is out of line, but I'm sure that one can be worked out. Why didn't, at that point, Sir Keir Starmer change the direction of his flight and go to DC?
Well, indeed, and it's the dishonesty of a lot of the British establishment not pointing out that the EU imposes tariffs itself and is a customs union which is pretty hostile to the rest of the world. I mean, there's a 10% tariff on American cars into Europe. But nothing like that going the other way. 2 and a bit, I think it is, going the other way. And the EU is plotting a massive increase in tariffs with this carbon border adjustment, they call it. But it's actually a big tariff. They're going to put a socking great tariff on anything coming into the EU from the rest of the world that has some kind of carbon in it. And we're likely to follow that. Please don't, Britain. It's self-harm again.
OK, Sir John, thank you very much. Nigel, let's bring you in. There's a fork in the road. The growth path seems to go to DC. The anti-growth path seems to go to the EU. Germany is thinking these tariffs certainly aren't going to help. What is stopping Sir Keir Starmer from making the logical choice? Is it an ideological tie to Brussels that simply can't be explained away?
Well, he's going to go and see President Trump. So when he does, I'm sure he'll be talking about this mythical trade deal that we've been waiting for since Boris Johnson. I mean, Boris told us that it was all ready and done and we could just pick it up. And
well, then Joe Biden got into power.
Well, it was before that. I mean, this was still under Trump's first presidency, that he was still around at the time. Anyway, we didn't get it. So at the moment, we're in a situation where 52% of our trade is with the EU, 18% is with America. At the moment, there's no reason for America to hit us with tariffs because imports and exports are roughly equal, so there's no deficit as far as the Americas are concerned. On the basis of that, Keir Starmer's right to be in Europe, right to try and get a reset to get less regulations, stopping or slowing up trade anyway. Trade hasn't actually fallen very much since Brexit, but at least no, it hasn't. No, I mean, in fact, over the last quarter of last year, it went up several points. So Brexit hasn't stopped it, but it has slowed it down. Okay. So the idea of actually sorting it out with Europe to make that easier would be a good idea.
Well, Nigel Nelson praised Brexit. Make a note of that in the diary, gentlemen. Nigel, Gawain, and Sir John Robert, of course, thank you very, very much for joining me in the studio. Thanks to my panel. Now, coming up next, has two-tier Keir struck once again because the Prime Minister is now accused of breaking COVID restrictions at the height of lockdown, despite being one of the strongest advocates, of course, for tougher measures at the time. That's next here on Farage.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
We've got the Daily Mail now with the latest in the court case over whether a man is a woman or a man. It's a tough question. And J.K. Rowling has given her opinion. I think I can guess what it is, Cressida.
Explosive twist in Australia's What is a Woman trans battle as Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling gets involved. So this is the court case Giggle versus Tickle. Tickle was a...
He's Mr. Men.
That's right. It's a Mr. Men trans battle.
Kind of is a Mr. Man.
It was a women's group, wasn't it? Tickle, Giggles... Oh, I get it wrong. Giggles for girls. And Roxy Tickle, who is a trans woman, wanted to join this group and wasn't allowed, was banned for being a biological male, and then sued and amazingly got $10,000 for this, which is already extraordinary to me.
Yeah.
But it's now doubling down and is going to file a cross appeal seeking to upgrade the judgment.
Yeah.
So Roxy has come back for another bite of the cherry.
And I've had a look at this Roxanne Tickle, the trans woman.
Pretty?
No, not one of the pretty ones. Not a Blair White. Just looks like, to be honest, it looks like
you could be sued for $10,000.
Looks like one of us.
Yeah.
To be honest, no. Like I mean, I'll happily.
For yourself.
No, I think it's an absolute. It's a farce, and it's making a mockery of not just. It's not just making a mockery of women's right to have their own spaces. It's making a mockery of genuine trans people who actually put some effort in and look like a woman.
What do you mean a genuine trans
And also,
people?
if
We don't believe in that.
If your name was Roxanne, if you were going to transition, you wouldn't pick the name Roxanne Tickle.
What?
You choose Tess.
Tess. That's a kind of name. No, the truth is that's one of the problems, is you get a choice in the name you're going to choose. And of course, you're going to choose like a hot Roxanne. That's a hot Roxanne. That's a great name. They're not going to choose.
You don't think
Louis.
Tess would work better with Tickle?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, covering for the big man. Now, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has been accused of flouting COVID restrictions again, after it was revealed this time that he met with his voice coach, as you do, during the height of the pandemic. Mr Rules could be heard scolding Boris Johnson as lawmakers should not be lawbreakers, but I don't recall voice coaches being on the list of key workers, do you? Now, here we go. Let's have a little look at my list from 2020, shall we? Here is a list of essential key workers from the time. Let's get it on the screen. I'll go for it here. It is frontline health workers such as doctors, and also teachers and social workers, justice system, religious staff and public service journalists, local and national government workers, food production workers, police, armed forces personnel, firefighters and prison staff, transport workers and postal workers. And guess what? Nowhere does it say voice coaches. They simply were not key workers. But was it even worth it? Let's take a listen to Keir before and after this magical makeover.
My vision for Britain is simple. I want this to be the best country to grow up in and the best country to grow old in.
Now, that's before the magical makeover. Now, let's take a look at this clip, almost exactly 4 years later and after that makeover.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
The return of the sausages. Clearly money well spent. What a banger of a speech. And joining me now to discuss this is the political presentation coach, Graham Davis, and of course, my panel, former Reform spokesman Gawain Towler and GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. Graham Davis. Let's start with that. Let's push aside to the fact that clearly voice coaches aren't key workers. Was it worth it? Is there any difference in the Prime Minister's intonation before and after this magical makeover?
On those 2 clips you showed, no. But the problem for Keir Starmer is this. He's at his least effective presentationally when he tries to be something that he's not. And that is epitomised in the Prime Minister's questions in the House of Commons. The real power of a former criminal barrister like him doesn't come from shouty passion, it comes from forensic, cool dispassion and making sure that you've got a grasp of the facts, you've got a grasp of your case and a grasp of your opponent's weaknesses. Ironically, in the House of Commons, a more effective Starmer would be a calmer Starmer.
How do you mean by that? Just someone who's just calmer and more relaxed and not going for the throat? In fact, is he trying to be something he intrinsically just isn't and can never be?
He's not a showman. He's not a rabble-rouser. But, of course, the rabble doesn't need to be roused when they've got a huge majority and he's a very well-placed Prime Minister. But what he really should do is to make the most of his strengths and the strengths of the positions that Labour have. But also, he did something occasionally very effectively. While he was doing PMQs as Leader of the Opposition, once he asked, in a very quiet voice, the business gathering that occurred with 100 people in the gardens of number 10 Downing Street at 2 p.m. on that day, was alcohol served? And he sat down again. And that was a very effective, rather than using a rant before a question. And also to Kemi Badenoch, a couple of Prime Minister's questions ago, he said, I will apologise if I've got this wrong, but am I right in saying that this is a newly acquired passion by the Leader of the Opposition and that she has not raised grooming gowns in the House of Commons before? So that's when he's at his best. When he shouts, he just shouts himself into oblivion.
Okie dokie. Well, Graham Davis, thank you very much. Now, we do have a clip earlier on because this question was put to Keir Starmer in Brussels. Here it is.
Front. Thank you very much.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you.
Of course not.
Was your voice coach definitely a key word?
Rubbish journalism.
You can't really hear the journalist there. The journalist was shouting at him, is it true that voice coaches were key workers even? And, of course, he just walked off and didn't say a great deal. Thank you very much, Graham Davis, for joining us in the studio. Now, we've got some breaking news here, and it's this evening. And Reform UK has taken the lead for the first time in a new opinion poll by YouGov. Now, the polling firm says if a general election were held tomorrow, as you can see on your screen, 25% of British voters would choose Reform and 24% would choose Labour. This, I believe, is the second time that Reform have led a national poll, and on a third occasion they were joint first. Well, let's discuss this now with my panel, former Reform spokesman Gawain Towell and, of course, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Gawain, to you first. Seems to be something of a consolidation here, something of a trend. A lot of people, particularly those in the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, said, polls are polls. It was a freak, one-off, but it disappeared now. There's a consolidated trend emerging.
Yes. I have a mantra. Never believe a poll that makes you smile. Because you're bound to get it wrong. However, do believe the direction of travel. And I think clearly, in the last few months, the direction of travel is up. Now, it's all within the margin of error. It's all these polls are within here and there, and we now seem to have a three-party political system. And to be fair to the Lib Dems, they're biting at the Tories' heels too. Must be deeply depressing if you're Kemi. But the point being is, this is no longer a surprise. Nobody is surprised by this poll. If you'd asked 12 months ago, 6 months ago, anybody, the John Kirks of this world, anybody of this sort, can you imagine a Farage-led Reform Party being top of the polls just after Christmas? They'd have laughed in your face. Well, somebody said you're not laughing now.
Nigel Nelson, what's striking about this is it's both the Labour vote and the Conservative vote that seem to be falling at equity, and they're both folding into Reform.
Well, I mean, certainly Reform are on a roll at the moment. I mean, there's no question about that. I don't think this is an indicator of the next election or what would happen. It's more of an indicator of the fact that Labour have come up with a number of policies, especially through the budget, which have been unpopular. That should change come the general election. You've got Kemi Badenoch, who really doesn't seem to know what she's doing or what she stands for. Once people start studying the Reform's policy platform, they'll see it's got more holes than a pub dartboard.
It's not got more holes than the Labour budget.
Well, but well, it has if you start going through the platform. When you actually start looking at reform policies, you could start picking holes in those because they've been written on the back of one of Nigel Farage's flag
platform of
packets.
policies. That's exactly the Starmer approach. Don't have policies, come up with them after the election. It worked for Labour. Now, the point being is that people across the country are looking at Labour with policies and they're thinking those policies don't suit them. If you're an old person, if you're a farmer, if you work in business, if you try to employ somebody, if you're somebody with a job, none of these people are in Labour's interest group. And those people in traditional Labour areas, in traditional Tory areas, are looking at reform and saying, you know what, we know where they're coming from. We don't know the detail yet. You're right.
We don't know where they're going. Where they're going, and when you actually look at the new policy platform that Reform has put out, it doesn't add up. And so when voters...
What new policy platform was this? When?
Well, since the election. First of all, there was a manifesto during the election,
there's a contract
which was the Nigel Farage fag packet manifesto. But now we have a policy platform...
Policy platforms have not been delivered because we haven't delivered them yet. We're in the process of writing policies. So I'm happy with
you've
that.
written a whole load of new policies since the election.
I'd love to see them, because I've never seen them.
On the Reform website, and you'll find them there.
Contract. That's the old contract.
It is the contract with the people. That is what is on the current Reform website.
My point is that people know what reform are for. They don't know what the Tories are for, as Martin said, and they're looking at Labour and saying we don't like that.
They don't know what it's for. That's
they
the
do.
point.
They know it is in favour of, as he says very clearly.
Gentlemen, I have to call ding ding. Time out. It's a beautiful ding dong. Thank you very, very much to both my panel and to Graham. Thank you very, very much. Now, coming up next, do you remember when GB Energy promised us thousands of clean, green jobs and lower energy bills? Well, guess what? It turns out that utopian promise, populated with unicorns, might be 20 years away. That's next.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello. Well, there's plenty of fine weather around as higher pressure becomes established but unsettled in parts of Greece. So across the Canaries, largely dry on Tuesday. Across Gibraltar, perhaps just seeing some spells of rain or showers. Largely dry across parts of Italy as well with sunshine, but across Greece, we have got an area of low pressure, bringing some showers, perhaps quite heavy at times. But looking ahead across Wednesday and Thursday, plenty of settled weather and feeling pleasant too.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of wet weather around tonight and tomorrow, but fairly mild. It is going to turn colder come the end of this week. But for the time being, we've got a deep area of low pressure heading across Iceland, and its trailing, waving weather front is draping its way down towards northwest Scotland, where it's been a very wet evening. That rain will spread across Northern Ireland, then across much of western Scotland. Heavy enough, we've got a Met Office yellow warning in place for southwest Scotland. Most of England was, though, staying dry through the night. Quite murky across the southeast, some mist and fog, bit of drizzle is possible, and generally a bit milder than last night. Could dip down to the low single digits with some clearer skies in the east, but many places will start Tuesday quite a bit above freezing. But we will start with rain across central Scotland, West Wales. Much of England, though, will still be dry at this stage. Quite grey and murky across East Anglia and the southeast. There's that rain, a soggy start for a good part of Wales. Northwest England, southern Scotland, the rain edging away from Glasgow through the morning rush hour. In fact, much of northern and western Scotland also seeing some bright spells to start the day, but there will be showers coming in. Now, along this rain band, along this weather front, it's also going to be quite gusty, so a wet and windy spell, taking its time before it moves away from Wales. So a pretty soggy morning, that rain working into southwest England, into the Manchester area as well, and eventually jumping over the Pennines into parts of northeast England. Much of the rest of eastern England, though, having a dry day, turning brighter behind it, but with some showers. And quite a mild day. Again, double digits for many, but feeling cooler, particularly with the winds. Now, the winds will ease on Tuesday evening into the night, which will lead to a touch of frost on Wednesday morning. More showers coming into western Scotland, the north coast of Northern Ireland, but many places set fair on Wednesday thanks to high pressure. And for many, the dry, fine weather will continue through Thursday, Friday and into the weekend. However, it is also going to turn quite a bit colder.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage. Now, the boss of the Prime Minister's green quango, GB Energy, has today admitted that the election promises to cut bills and create thousands of clean, green jobs could take up to 20 years. It's one of Labour's 5 key missions, of course, for this Parliament after a manifesto commitment to save families hundreds of pounds on their bills, not just in the short term, but for good. Well, in his first broadcast interview, Jürgen Meyer, appointed by Downing Street as GB Energy's start-up chairman, suggested that this was a very long-term project, spanning decades, and repeatedly refused to say when household prices would be slashed. Take a listen.
Can we be clear as to how many jobs the northeast of Scotland will benefit from?
Great British Energy itself is going to create, over the next 5 years, 200 or 300 jobs in Aberdeen. That will be the size of our team. But look, that is...
They were promised 1,000.
Look, and I said, in the very long term, as we become a major energy champion, it may be many more than that.
What's the very long term?
Well, look, we grow these companies. Energy companies grow over 10, 20 years, and we're going to be around in 20 years as a British energy champion.
So it could take 20 years to get 1,000 jobs?
There we go, 20 years to get 200 jobs and potentially a few quid off your bills. Are they make up as they go along? Well, joining me now to discuss this is my panel, Reform spokesman Gawain Towler and GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Nigel, I want to start with you this time. This is total flannel, isn't it? This was promises thrown out there, clean, green, prosperous energy. Even they admit themselves might take 20 years and a fraction of the jobs promised.
I'm sure Jürgen Meyer wishes he never gave that interview, but if he can't keep the timetable that he's been set, and he knew that that timetable was impossible to keep, he shouldn't have taken the job in the first place. So what Labour needs to be doing is looking for a new start-up chairman to replace him. Because at the moment, the growth is predicated on this green revolution. So the idea will be to double onshore wind, triple solar, quadruple offshore wind, with the promise of 650,000 new jobs as a result of that. Labour have got to get a move on to get that done within the next 5 years.
That's another fantasy figure, 650,000 jobs. I've had energy secretaries on the show, I've had ministers on the show. So where are these jobs? When? And they haven't got a Scooby.
Well, the whole point was that they're meant to be in the next 5 years, and that's my point about GB Energy. GB Energy has got to be given a good kick to get a move on and start producing what was promised in the Labour manifesto.
Gawain Towler, is this just the emperor's new clothes? They don't know where the jobs are, they don't know when they'll come, they don't know when our bills will go down.
I've just been listening to Nigel. I thought his name was Nigel Nelson, not Hans Christian Andersen. It's fantasy land. It's absolutely bananas. And I have to say, the body blow to people in Aberdeen, made promises, is devastating. And Nigel's right, of course, this fellow should never have taken a job. But nobody can take a job that cannot happen. It's not going to work. It calls itself GB Energy. And yet the government and Miliband have set their face against real energy production in this country. They are putting concrete on fracking zones. They are getting rid of plutonium. They are banning the expansion of our own energy treasure. And yet.
To lead the way in green energy. That's the whole point.
Lead the way to where? Nobody wants to lead off a cliff.
That is the direction of travel of the rest of the world.
No, it's not.
So rather than buy the technology...
In America, it's being junked. In Brussels, they're toning it down. It is not... We are going to be left like a Japanese soldier on a green island with no jobs, no food, no future.
Our choice will be either that we follow the rest of the world and therefore we have to buy in the technology.
We're buying in there
or we develop the technology in this country to sell to the rest of the world. That is the whole point of it.
We have developed that sort of technology when it comes to small modular nuclear reactors. But we won't use them ourselves.
Then we should.
Because this government has set its face against them. And you can't take a job, and you're right, you are right about Jürgen Meyer. He should never have taken a job that he could not actually do. And I suppose we should be happy that he was honest in that interview.
OK, gentlemen, again, let's call it a second ding-ding there. Beautiful ding-dong, round 2, and there's still plenty more to come. And along with the Prime Minister's green initiative, GB Energy, a wind turbine has gone up in Flambe. Yesterday, a wind turbine in Cambridgeshire burst into flames, sending black smoke billowing into the sky and leaving residents in a blind panic.
Not much as we are.
And the big question is, has Labour's own net zero plans gone up in smoke? Well, I'm joined now to discuss it with my panel once again. And isn't this the point? Can we get that picture back on the screen? Can we see the flambéed wind turbine? It's simply going up in smoke. Gawain Towler, it's a talismanic image, is it not, to an entire policy that seems to be going up in smoke?
It is. Yes, it is talismanic, but a machine going is not news to me. Machines break. And it could be a car, it could be a wind turbine. No, I do think the net zero policy is mad. I do think that trying to, what you were talking about, quadrupling the number of people offshore, wind farms offshore, but they haven't thought about salt and the way that gets into the gears. They talk about extra wind turbines. What's 6 times the amount of solar panels in a country with clouds? All of this is nuts, but I don't think this is particularly important.
I agree with that totally. I mean, cars catch fire. We don't think about banning all cars. Just because of that. So a few wind turbines have caught fire. That doesn't actually take away from the idea we should still use them to get to net zero.
Well, we won't, and it doesn't work, and it's not going to happen. But the point about a machine breaking...
Ding ding for the third time. Thank you very much to my panel. Now, today, tradesmen took to the streets of Westminster to demand stricter laws after it emerged that fewer than 1 in 300 tool thefts ever result in a charge. I was speaking to one of the tradesmen who considered taking his own life after thousands of pounds worth of tools were stolen from his van, leaving him simply unable to work. Please don't go anywhere.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
An absolute monster. It took Chloe and Sean Ing 90 minutes to reel in this gigantic 8-foot-long monster fish from Chigborough Fisheries in Essex. And upon weighing this enormous marine beast, it was found to have been 7 pounds heavier than the existing British record, a 143-pound catfish caught also in Essex. But as I understand it, you actually went for a Chinese meal when fate struck. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. So I was fishing an area of Chigborough where you have to fish at a fair distance. So I cast my rods out and then we ordered a Chinese. So I got the bite at about 10 to 8 at night. And then about 20 minutes into it, my phone started ringing, the Chinese guys at the gate with my delivery. So I had to send a couple of guys off to go and get it. And then, the fight, obviously, you can't just stop the fight to go and get your Chinese. The fight went on, for about an hour and a half in total. There's no net in the world that's big enough for this fish. So we had to send out, first of all, I sent out a mate, Alex. He went out there to go and basically use what we call a sling. So that's a safe apparatus that we use to take the fish out of the water. He then went and he turned around and he was like, we're going to need another sling. So then we sent out another friend with a sling, and these slings are 4 foot long each. So then we had the catfish wrapped up in 2 slings, and it was still slightly longer than that. And then we got to a point where we was like, now we've got to try and get it out of the water to photo, to weigh it, because obviously we knew then that it was possibly going to be a UK record.
GB News.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel. Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney. Now, tradespeople descended on Parliament Square today. In fact, I was out there shaking hands with the lads, with one group even bringing a tank to protest against tool thefts, because the action which is taking place in the heart of Westminster today is demanding that the Labour Party do more to protect tradespeople's livelihoods and fight against a plague, a growing epidemic of tool theft. Now, the stats show an astonishing picture. £98 million worth of tools were stolen from tradespeople last year, and that's tools being stolen every 12 minutes on average in 2023. 78% of all tradespeople have had their tools nicked at some point or other, and incredibly, 94% of stolen tools are never, ever even recovered. Now, each theft costs tradesmen between £1,000 and £5,000 on average, simply annihilating these boys' chances of making a livelihood, beg your pardon. Now, will the government listen? And if so, what can be done about this epidemic of theft? Well, joining me now in the studio is Stephen Baker, a tradesman who has been severely impacted by tool theft, and the former Reform spokesman Gawain Towler, and GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Stephen, I'll start with you. Welcome to the studio. Thank you very, very much for coming. I'll shake you by the hand. These figures are eye-popping. They're astonishing. Nothing seems to be done. These tools are getting knocked out at car boot sales. It seems to be very, very organised crime. And it's getting worse, and try and find a copper. Good luck with that. You'll have more chance of finding Santa. But let's talk about your story. So this crash into your life, when and what happened to you next?
I suppose it crashed in. I had a few sticky situations going on with the missus. I split up with the missus. I was in a hotel. I was in a Premier Inn hotel. And, I come back from a few beers with a mate after on a Friday, as you normally do as a tradesman, and come back to see a box of screws on the side of the floor. So I thought I'd never open the sliding door. So as I approached the van, I noticed a small incision they make, which is near there. I opened the door to find everything gone. About 10 grand's worth of tools gone. 10 grand's worth of kit simply vanished. 22 seconds to get in the van, 4.5 minutes to empty it. That's what's on the CCTV. And that had all just simply gone walkabout. Vanished between your eyes. What did the old bill do? Was there any chance of getting a follow-up? So the police turned up. I ran into the hotel, obviously, saying, called the police, van's been done, And the police did turn up, had a quick look at the CCTV. I wouldn't say they were there longer than 5 minutes. There's your crime reference number. See you later. And at this point, were you insured? Is there any way of getting this back? Yeah, so I had towing cover insurance on the van, but because my actual van that I owned was in a crash, it was in getting repaired. So I had a higher van. But my tool cover, where it was a third party, was only covered on that van itself. So, no, it wasn't covered. That was their way out of it. So that left you completely high and dry, abandoned by the insurers. Police didn't have much interest. And what happened next? This severely impacted your mental health. You couldn't work. Yeah, I couldn't work. I couldn't go out and do my day-to-day bit that kept me going every morning. Do you know what I mean? It messed me up massively. It got to a point where I actually felt like there was no need to be here on this planet. And I found myself at a multi-storey car park, sitting on the edge, and I nearly went. And the thing that saved me was I had a text message come through from my partner, I'm back with her now, but my she was my ex-partner at the time, and it was my just a load of gobbledygook, a load of random letterage, and it was my son. I knew it was my son just button bashing on mum's phone, and that's what woke me up. I thought, what are you doing? Like, you idiot, sort of thing. So, got back off, and just went from there. Got a lot of help from friends, a lot of support from friends and stuff like that, and moved a bit more forward. Done a bit of recovery jobs, obviously, for a friend of mine who's run a recovery firm at the time. And, I got a contact from Southampton Police Station saying, we found your tools. So I zipped down to Southampton Police Station. I'd done a shout-out on a radio station we listened to, Fixed Radio. And I was like, yeah, I'm getting my tools back, all of this malarkey. And well, when I've got down there, I had all my paperwork to show they were my tools, but they had scratched all the serial codes off. So there was no formal way of identifying those tools belonged to me. So then, in police eyes, they can't return it, which is fair. You can't just hand over tools if you don't know whose they are, if you can't prove it. So on the way back, I phoned up Fixed Radio, and I was like, don't do that shout-out. I didn't want to look like, I didn't want to look silly. And before I know it, there's a couple of lads on there, Brad and Sam from the Bull Builders. They contacted me and they said, we want to interview you and do a bit of talk on tool theft and how it's impacted you and stuff. And so we done the interview, and lo and behold, they surprised me with Fixed Radio, surprised me with about 10 grand's worth of walk gear that I had stolen. So they got me back up on my feet. That was my boost. And then
isn't that just astonishing?
Oh, it just shows you there's good people in the world. And without them, I wouldn't be where I am today. They're my main boost. That's what gave me my ladder in life. And then from there, spotted Schwebb's, the gas expert's post and petition he was doing with Parliament. Something I think it was like 40-something thousand signatures in 6 weeks or so. Obviously, Parliament got dissolved. Petitions go in the bin, basically. They're still there, but they don't get accounted for, they don't get listened. And then that's how Trades United was formed.
I mean, it's an astonishing story of, like, triumph over near tragedy. I mean, you owe your life to your boy.
Oh, massively. I owe my life to all my kids. My kids are my best friends at the end of the day. And without them, again, I wouldn't be where I am. They are my little bit of support. They're there. I still get up in the mornings. I'm still down for about 10, 15 minutes. You've got to sort of like sit on the edge of the bed and motivate yourself to keep going. But then you sit there and you think of your kids. You think, right, I've got to build something for them, for when they're older, they have something to continue on in the family generation, hopefully. So,
do you think enough is done to? I mean, white working class blokes or tradesmen are very high risk. You work often alone. The precarious work conditions, losing your tools. Difficult economic situation. Politically, no one seems to care.
Yes and no. The problem is, I mean, the police do care. Yeah. They just haven't got the funding around them to help out. They haven't got the power either. The whole thing of the sentencing and stuff like that is so weak when it comes to it. It's not strong enough, which makes the thieves think, for argument's sake, I'll do it again. There was one lad that recently just got caught. He got caught red-handed stealing the tools in his car and everything. And the sentencing he got was 2 weeks.
And that is a key point. I've got a quick minute with you guys. 3/4 of those who even get nicked, which is hardly any, get non-custodial sentences. Nigel, tool theft blights lives. I mean, this fella almost didn't make it.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about the kind of the value of the tools that you lost, even if they caught those guys, I would have thought that they should have gone down for what happened. I don't know if it would help hugely if you were able to ban, say, tool sales at car boot sales, whether that would make any difference.
Well, it would make a massive difference, and the reason being is because if you can kill the source of where they're having an easy sale, then it kills the source of the reason of them to steal it. If they've got nowhere to sell it, then they've got no reason to steal it, basically. And it's not just car boot sales. Car boot sales are a major part in this. And, I mean, the issue we've got now is that they're doing receipts. People are making up false receipts. And they're doing, like, 50 malicious tools, blah, blah, blah. So the police got no real evidence to say, yeah, they're stolen. They've got an evidence there saying they have. But it's also pawn shops as well. Yeah. Certain names I don't know if I can mention, but I will. Sod it. Yeah. I will. Sod it. I don't care. Cash converters is another one. Simple thing. If you typed in a brand of tool, i.e. DeWalt, Makita, Milwaukee, it's just an endless page of tools, and you can't get to the bottom of it.
OK, Stephen, I have to stop you there because I have to say, if anybody has been affected by this discussion, then please call the Samaritans on their 24-hour helpline. That is 116 123. Fantastic story. Thanks for joining us, Stephen.
No, you're welcome.
Pleasure.
Thank you for having me in.
Brave to speak out. Thank you. Gawain, thank you. No, Nelson, thank you. And up next is State of the Nation. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 till 6 p.m. Thanks for your company this evening and have a fantastic evening. And thanks to my panel. Superb. Well done.
Take care. Thank you.
Cheers.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of wet weather around tonight and tomorrow, but fairly mild. It is going to turn colder come the end of this week. But for the time being, we've got a deep area of low pressure heading across Iceland, and its trailing, waving weather front is draping its way down towards northwest Scotland, where it's been a very wet evening. That rain will spread across Northern Ireland, then across much of western Scotland. Heavy enough, we've got a Met Office yellow warning in place for southwest Scotland. Most of England was, though, staying dry through the night.